Good afternoon and welcome to What I Wish I Knew at 30, the podcast where we get real about life, business, resilience, and everything in between. I'm Fran Harper, and if I could go back and have a chat with my 30-year-old self, well, let's just say that conversation would be an interesting one. So I'm joined today by Mr. Mark Field. And before I go into this, I just want to welcome Mark to What I Wish I Knew at 30. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today. And I know to everyone listening out there, if you're listening, the chances are you're ambitious, driven, and trying to figure out this wild ride we call life. So the guests that I bring on to What I Wish I Knew at 30 are guests who've been through the highs, the lows, and everything in between. So we can all learn from their experiences. And today I have an incredible guest with me, a personal friend of mine, someone that I've worked with over a number of years, Mr. Mark Field. And before I introduce Mark personally, I just want to go through a few of the things that Mark has achieved in his life. Mark is the founder and CEO of the award-winning international food and grocery consultancy, Prof Consulting Group, now based in the UK. He operates a team of global retail and food manufacturing specialists. Prior to launching Prof Consulting, Mark headed the $9 billion private label for Coles supermarkets in Australia and held senior leadership roles in the UK across red meat and poultry for Moy Park Poultry, Two Sisters Food Group, and the Hilton Food Group, supplying the leading retailers and global QSR chains. And I think you'll all join with me in welcoming Mark to what we're doing today and to What I Wish I Knew at 30. We're going to dive into the hard-earned lessons, the mistakes that turned into wisdom, and what they wish they had at 30. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. All right, Mark, welcome to the show.
Fabulous. Thank you, Fran, and thank you for such a kind introduction. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending the next 30 minutes with us and just going through a few of the highs and lows of your career and where you've been, what you've done, and where you've come from, and hopefully sharing a few words of wisdom for the younger generation. So let's start with this. Imagine we're jumping in a time machine right now. You're 30 years old again. Where are you? What are you doing? What's going through your mind at that stage of life?
That's a great question to start, Fran. I think at that point you're full of energy. The world's your oyster, and you can achieve whatever you want. And I think you're unafraid to take risks. And I think today's environment is a lot more complicated than it was nearly 20 years ago when I was 30. And I think you've got to continue to back yourself. You've got to continue to back yourself. And I think one thing that is consistent is the requirement to demonstrate personal values. The old adage that be great to people on the way through because you don't know if you're going to meet them again on the way back down, I think is really sound advice. You know, the world is changing at pace, but I think as I look back at when I was 30, I hope that I was consistent in my approach. I tried my best at everything I could do, demonstrate values with value. And I think, that sets up any of your listeners for the challenges in today's environment, regardless of which country or city they're operating in. I think
Absolutely.
as you engage with people, you got to be the same. You got to deliver a consistent message. You can't be different tomorrow than you were yesterday, and you can't be different next week. And if there's pressures there that's influencing your lifestyle outside of work, you've got to try and put those to the side when you're engaging with people, because it's not your fault I've had a bad day, or it's not your fault that I've slept badly and got pressures outside that work environment. You've got to be your best self. And you can't afford to turn the camera off, so to speak.
No, I love that. And that's absolutely true. And I love those words of wisdom around, you never do know when you're going to meet people again. So I think I completely agree with 100% in that the awareness of really treating people with respect and just understanding, having that awareness and understanding that you never know when you're going to meet people again. I've got some wonderful stories about that, but it's absolutely true. And in the industry that you're in and I'm in as well, the food industry, it's basically a very small industry, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is for sure. And I think, if you're going in to see a major retailer, the being courteous to the security guard when you get in there or the lady on reception, I think that's really important because it's your overall brand, it's your overall image, and it's how you interact. And, I remember a story when I was growing up, and maybe I was a bit younger than 30 at the time, but it was about someone that had gone for a job interview. And, they go in and see the HR boss at the time and they have the interview. And actually, the HR boss then said to the receptionist, how was so and so when they came in to see you? And whilst
Mm.
it wasn't the receptionist that was conducting the interview, their feedback on how the candidates had performed and interacted with her was an important part of the HR scorecard. So, coming in and not demonstrating your true values from the minute you get out your car or walk through that office door could cost you in a number of places. And I don't think you realise at times the impact that you can have in areas where you're not necessarily planning that to be your meeting.
No, no, very, very, very true. So did you feel like you had life figured out at 30? Were you just winging it at that point?
Oh no, I was super close to retiring, Fran. No, I think at 30, I don't think I had it sorted, but I think you felt adaptable. So you felt you could achieve whatever you wanted at 30, which I think is a great place to be. But I think that was what it was like then. I'm not sure that's what it's like now. And to give that a little bit of context, Fran, I grew up probably as you did in an environment where it was a career for life or a job for life. You stayed
Mm,
with the same bank because it would mean something for you. You stayed with the same insurance company because, and in today's environment now, and we've got two young girls, as you know, in today's environment that counts for nothing. A job for life now is very unusual as
yeah,
opposed to, I've done 30 or 50 years at a particular company. So that landscape's changed. And as a candidate
yeah,
or as an individual, you've got to look at the job market different and the careers opportunity because it's a very different landscape than it was
mm,
when I started. Whether you've been with a bank
yeah,
for a short while or a long while, in reality doesn't make a lot of difference now. When you go to them and you
yeah.
want a mortgage or you want a loan or you're going overseas and you want support, all of that is less important now than it was. And I think that they're changing dynamics now that make the workplace and life a bit more fluid.
Mm. Well, it's not so much it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's not just the relationship, it's actually the digital footprint that everything that we do, our banks, our insurance companies pretty much have every piece of digital information. So that relationship with the bank manager, I know we used to have a very good relationship with the with our bank managers. It was essential. But yeah, as you say, that's not something that's really that necessary anymore. In fact, even getting in to see a person is almost impossible. I think
So
certainly in
it,
my experience.
so it all changes everything and it changes the life skills that you develop on that way. So, at 30, we'd had the mortgage, we'd bought a house, maybe bought a second house together. But when you look at it then and the experiences you learned by being in that room with the people and them taking you through the process and so on and so forth. Now you're doing it online. Now you're doing it with somebody that's not necessarily a specialist in that area. As a young
Mm,
person starting out today, it's a very different landscape. But I think they've also got
mm,
skills now that they're developing far quicker because of the workplace and the culture around them now that probably took me longer to develop. I remember when I got my first work phone and my first laptop, and that seemed
mm.
massive. Well, there's very few jobs you would do today without a phone or a laptop.
No, that's right. I can remember a big heavy phone in a leather case, which I used to carry over my shoulder,
Yeah,
and a fax machine, and you could take it from the leather case and plug it into the car.
yeah. So
Yeah,
very
the
different
world.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very different. So what was your biggest dream at that time?
I wanted to go and work overseas. I was lucky enough to go out to New Zealand in the year 2000 and spend 3 weeks there as part of the Millennium Link study tour, going from the north to the south and really understanding agriculture without subsidies. That was the remit that five of us went out there to do. And I loved the country and I loved the scale of the meat industry over there. And spending time in New Zealand was
Mm,
something that I really wanted to do.
fantastic. And you survived the Y2 bug. Wasn't the
Yes,
world going to end in
that's right.
on New
That's
Year's
right. Yeah,
Eve?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely going back.
So
But
did
yeah,
life
so that
take
was
you
that was
where
key.
yeah, so
I think life's been good to me. Did it take me where I expected? I'm not really sure, Fran, but I think it gave me opportunities there. What I didn't want to do was have one job and live in the same village and not experience things outside of that community.
mm,
Not because I didn't like the community, but I wanted to try something
mm,
different and I wanted to give our family the opportunity to try something different. And, whilst I didn't work in New Zealand, I've been very lucky to spend a lot of time in New Zealand. and a lot of time working with great New Zealand businesses. So it's almost like a second home. So I think from that perspective, yeah, I achieved what I wanted from that side, just for a slightly different approach.
Well, that's something in all these years I didn't know about you, Mark, that you had a soft spot for New Zealand. I
Yeah.
thought your soft spot was for Australia.
I think Australia and New Zealand are so similar. There's so many similarities between the two, and being
Yeah.
lucky enough to live in Melbourne for nearly 10 years as we did, you were only a few hours
Mhm.
away from New Zealand, and it made it incredibly accessible. So I think
Yeah.
from that perspective, and the ability to see our girls grow up in a different country and experience something different, and then decide where do they
Mm,
want to
mm.
go next was some of the things that were
Yeah.
really important to me at 30 about it's not a big world when you go out there. You can be from the UK to Australia in the day, the same as
Mm.
traveling to Scotland. It takes you nearly a day now over here by road. And it is just having
Exactly.
that lens so you can say, okay, where would I like to be? And giving your children that opportunity, I think.
And you've definitely done that. I mean, the amount of travel that's been involved and just opening eyes up to everything. I mean, as you said, the world is very small, isn't it? That's something we've all learned through traveling and back and forth to Australia, through the Emirates, through the States and everything. It's wonderful. So looking back now, is what's something you were completely wrong about at 30?
Was I completely wrong about at 30? Was I completely wrong about at 30? Sorry, you got me on that one. I did make a note, but
No, no.
at 30. Sorry, Fran, you got me on that one. We come back to that one, yeah?
Yeah, no, we can definitely come back to that one. So they say life is the best teacher, and sometimes the lessons come in disaster. So let's talk maybe put it a different way. Let's talk about the biggest curveballs life threw at you, whether it was in business, relationships, or personal growth. What's one experience that at the time felt like the worst thing ever? Retrospectively, probably ended up actually shaping who you are now.
I think there's two examples in there, Fran, if I could perhaps share both. So, one's the UK and one's more recent in Australia. I think the one in the UK there was my first job after coming out of university. Started in the meat industry, as we talked about earlier. But I think being involved in
Mm,
the meat industry at a time that we saw those food scares coming through in quite quick succession, starting off with the BSE
mm.
challenge in the
Yeah, yeah.
UK, being working in the industry there, and the demands from the retailers, the demands from likes of McDonald's to understand about the supply chain, to understand about the controls, working with government. I think, first job in, just over 20, fresh out of university, thought you knew a good bit about the industry, but actually being in that environment where many of us didn't have the answers, you just had to back yourself
Yeah.
and surround yourself with great people, both within your customer base and the government, and find a way through. And as we said right at the beginning, being consistent in that approach and staying level headed and
Mm.
not being afraid to make a decision based on the facts that were available at that time, as opposed to, wanting more
Yeah.
and more detail to make a decision. I think that definitely set me up from a career perspective. And it gave me exposure
Mm.
to senior leaders within our customer base that I didn't expect to be getting at just over 20 years of age. You hope to meet some of those people later on, but it was definitely a baptism of fire. It was 4th of December 2011. I just arrived in Melbourne. I was out there a month ahead of the family, as you know really well. First day in a new job,
Mm.
and someone says to me, "You'll go to a barbecue between now and Christmas, and someone will ask you where you work and what you do." And they said, "You'll be embarrassed to say." And I couldn't believe that I'd come all the way around the world, left our family, left a good job in the UK to work for a private label business that even some of my team were saying they weren't proud to be. I think that was a defining moment for me. And there was an article recently at one of the trade shows up here that Archie Norman talked about his transformational program when he goes into the retailers, and he talked very openly in that report about, you go to a transformational business, you've got to take about 80% of the senior leaders out to drive change. And I think going back and looking at the number
Yeah.
of people I changed during my time in Australia, you can win some people's minds, but other people's minds you just can't change. And I think at 30,
Yeah.
you just got to back yourself that you're doing the right decision. So you're making the right decisions, and you're doing it in the most humane way as you can, because ultimately everyone's got families to go home to. But it's
Mm.
yeah, I think they're two different stories that connect. And I look back and think I wouldn't do either of them differently, but they've definitely helped develop me into the person I am today.
Yeah. And what was the hardest part about that experience?
I think the fact that you're leading a team in an environment that initially was very strange to me, to be in a different country, different team, different business, the other side of the table, sat as a retailer rather than as a food manufacturer, which had been my career until that point. I think it's just
Mm.
deciding how you're going to change those mindsets. How do you say we're doing it now because it's the right thing to do, as opposed to we've tried it and it didn't work, so we're not going to try it again? Because you're part of a change business, and if you're part of a change business, you've got to have that consistent energy to drive transformation.
And that must have been really, really difficult, as you said, to have left a good job in the UK to come out to Australia, where a lot of people think that Australia is exactly the same as the UK because we speak English, but in fact it is extremely different and a very, very different culture in my experience. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, I would absolutely, Fran. I think you can't go from one country to another and say, well, this works in that market, so we're going to do it there, whether it's management style or whether it's even down at a product level. But what you've got to do is use
Yeah.
that same approach. So to be the same person you were in the UK, take the same approach to people you would, put this, demonstrate the same consistency, the same work ethic, and throw yourself into the market and understand what you need to do very quickly. I look back and I was really fortunate to be part of a transformational program the size of Coles, and something that is
Yeah.
still regarded as 37 or 38 consecutive quarters of growth in any business is incredible. But to do that in grocery retail, it'll
Mm.
be a long time before we see that again. But you meet great people on the way through, you learn new skills, and it tests you. And I think, as we said right at the beginning, it's about consistency and not being afraid to challenge yourself.
For sure. So if you could go back and whisper advice to yourself in that moment, what would you say
I don't
about your
think I
British
would.
mug?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I don't think I would do much different, Fran. I don't look back and have many regrets at things I've done or not done, because I think if you're
Yeah,
consistent and you deliver it in the way in which you're happy to be judged, then that's a great outcome. Yeah.
I love that, and I think that is the true point of consistency, isn't it? Because when you're values driven, then you don't kind of well, no, maybe not ever, but I mean, it's certainly a wasted energy to be looking at any kind of regrets.
Yes.
But obviously, it's good to know what you learn through those. So, would you say that those challenges changed the way you approach success today? Because you're in a very different environment now.
Yes, I think those challenges absolutely have, because I think it's given me the ability to look at it through different lenses. So what
Mm.
should you do because this is best practice, and you're going into an environment as an advisor or as an expert, but also to understand what those people in that business are going through and some of the challenges they have, because you've got to take them on the journey. So I think that sort of all-roundness, if that's the right way of describing it, just gives you a greater
Mm.
understanding of the environment, the opportunity, but also how to drive that change within their business, because every business is different, as we know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's clearly given you experience for the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm very, very fortunate from that. And I think, as we talk to clients, the ability to have sat both sides of the table, seen it through their eyes, but also to see it through a retailer's eyes, just enables us to have a very different narrative. And yeah, that's what gets you up every day.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's get to the heart of this episode. If you could give your 30-year-old self just three pieces of advice, what would they be?
Oh, it'd have to be absolutely consistency, as we've talked
Yeah.
about. Be consistent, deliver value with values, yeah, and be able to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of each day, yeah, and know that you've been honest to yourself, yeah, because the best judge of you is
Yeah,
yourself.
absolutely. You know whether you've done the right thing or not.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
look, that's powerful. And, we touched on it a little bit. Do you think younger professionals and entrepreneurs now today struggle with the same things we did? Or do you think they're facing a completely different world? And I
I
think
think
I
they've
know where you're.
Yeah. I think they've got some of the same challenges that we've had, but I think they've got a lot more challenges as well that weren't around when we were younger. I think the pressure of social media, the working from home
Mm,
mentality, whilst it's really good for some people, I can't imagine how I would have been lucky enough to achieve what I've achieved if we'd been in a work from home culture at that point. Because meeting people at the cooler, at the coffee machine, those ad hoc meetings you have, all of those have created opportunity. And looking at your own brand, looking at my brand, they've enabled me to network and,
yeah.
and deliver impact with people that maybe I wouldn't have met as frequently or as often.
Mm,
But that said, I
mm.
think today's working environment also offers lots of opportunities, but it is a different workplace for sure. And there's also the challenge around AI, and that's
Absolutely.
interesting in itself. So you're in an environment where you're the expert because you've studied or you've done X amount of years. Now actually people will compare it with what they've seen on AI, and they think they're an expert. So the whole marketplace is changing, Fran. I think it's super exciting for young people, and hopefully the
Oh,
values and being honest to yourself helps them. Yeah,
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think an AI, well, that's a whole other podcast, isn't it?
yeah, it is.
But
Yeah,
that's Well, I love it. I've spent quite a bit of time now really studying and getting to understand lots of different platforms. And what's your favorite platform at the moment?
I like the one that Lewis Hamilton has just endorsed, and Perplexity.
Oh, I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, Perplexity. Lewis Hamilton's just done a deal with them, which is what made me research them. I just like it.
Yeah,
I think it's easy to use, a high level of confidence
yeah.
in the answers I'm getting. And actually, when I used it the other day, some of the information I'd put out there came up in the search, which I was quite pleased with. But no,
Fantastic.
but it's
That's
about
nice to
using.
know.
Yeah, no, surely, but it's about using them in the right way. I definitely do.
Yeah.
I think you've got to use it, and you've got to use it in the right way to embrace it. But if you think you can do a technical report on AI and use that, or write a blog on AI and use that, I don't think that's where the benefits is. But taking access to large amounts of data, breaking it down very quickly to give you
Mm,
the starting point, I think is really powerful. Yeah.
yeah, no, for sure. So, what's one mindset shift that completely changed your approach to success and, to the success that you've got now?
Oh, I think that's an easy one, Fran. I think that's an easy one for me. I think it is my time at Coles and the arrival of Amazon coming into the Australian market. And one of my colleagues at the
Okay.
time was one of my colleagues had lived in the US. He'd worked for Amazon, and studying Amazon as we were fortunate enough to do before they arrived in the market. The understanding that Amazon would focus on the customer, not the product, was an absolute mind shift for me. For ages, I think
Right. Um,
as a food manufacturer, you want to sell a product to a retailer. As a retailer, they wanted to buy a product and sell it to the customer. But that arrival of Amazon really signified the change in our business, a change in the brand, and the way I changed contributed to the changing of the team's mindset around what does the customer want and what problem are we trying to solve, rather than this is a great product, so the customer's going to understand it and buy it. And a real mind shift. And I think you talk to the Australian retailers today, and they're still of that mind shift, thankfully, that it's about what does the customer want and how we meet in that customer need. But the trigger for it was the preparation of Amazon arriving. Even
wow.
today, even today, talking to clients, it's about, what product are they trying to offer? What customer need are they trying to service? Whereas, 30 years ago, that the customer, unfortunately, wasn't talked about very much.
No, it's absolutely true.
Mm.
It's absolutely true. You went through your own gate process of products, provided, basically produced a range, and then sent everybody out into the marketplace to sell it. So you're right. That's absolutely true. Well, that's a really interesting part and a significant shift in, in a real universal sense, really. So, what's the best advice you ever received, and who gave it to you?
There was a couple of examples I had here. I think probably the one I look back on and probably made the greatest impact on me was again at my time at Coles, and we were trying to launch a range of products under the banner of Ultimate. So the idea was they'd be the absolute best that we had within our portfolio. So this particular case was an ultimate dessert that the chefs had created. Really, really good product, yeah. But I think the difference is it was really good. And I was fortunate enough to be spending some time with Archie Norman at the time, and we were trying this product together. And so we're both stood in the tasting room, and I think for those of you listeners that don't know, Archie is probably one of the most famous retail change leaders in the industry today. Yeah. And now obviously chairman of
Mm.
Marks and Spencers. But we're trying this dessert, and we're talking about, Archie, this is what it should be like, and we're trying it. And we both take a spoonful, and we both enjoyed the first spoonful. And while we were talking in that brief time, he said to me, he said, Mark, he said, if this was really the ultimate, he said, we'd have both gone back in with a second spoon already, which we hadn't done. And just that real life moment with someone that's been so, or continues to be so impactful in the industry, stayed with me forever. Of all the products that we were fortunate enough to try, and those products that we've shared with Archie and got his feedback, it was that particular one that we both acknowledged that this product was very good, but it wasn't the ultimate. And
Yeah.
I think, that thing is back to what we were saying right at the beginning, Fran. If you're going to be consistent, if you're going to deliver value with values, if you're saying something is really, really good, or you're saying it's the ultimate or the
Yeah.
best, it's got to be. And on this occasion, it was a great moment to reflect on.
I love that, and what a really clever way to actually determine it as well. You
Yeah,
haven't actually gone back in for that second spoonful, therefore it can't be that great. Because
yeah,
I definitely know products. We've been on taste panels where products been, give me another one, and like people don't talk because they're eating something. So yeah, no, that's really cool. That's really clever. That's brilliant, Mark. Thank you. So we've covered the deep stuff. Now let's have a bit of fun. I'm going to hit you with some quick fire questions. So are you happy with that?
Yeah, yeah, go for it, Fran. He says, fingers crossed.
So what's the worst business or life advice you ever got?
Oh, so this goes back to my days at school. I had a paper round. I was very fortunate. I managed to save, and I was really interested in buying some shares. Being at that age, you could buy shares at that point if you're under 18. I was buying
Okay.
shares. I was really interested in the stock exchange or the stock market, and at that time, a lot of the UK businesses were launching. So it was just the right time, the right environment, and I really got
Mm.
excited about this, and I wanted to go in and be a stockbroker. And the worst piece of advice I had was I remember it now, my careers lecturer or careers advisor at school said to me, if it's not a family business, yeah, you will really struggle to get into stockbroking. And it changed my direction. And, I
Oh,
laugh about it now because I've been really lucky with the career path I've had to date. But my biggest
yeah.
mistake, I think, was taking the view of one person and really
Mm.
trusting that view as opposed to, right back to your early start, what would I do different if I was asking somebody now? I went to I did the
Yeah.
proper thing through the career advisor. I got the advice. I got the answer I didn't really want to the advice that I wanted, and that
Mm.
that changed my career path. But I would say to anyone that's listening, you've got to do your research now. And I think at that time, before the internet was strong, some of the social media platforms that we've talked about on this call, weren't about in that day. Dare I say? And you're making me feel really old now, Fran. But
All right.
I made the mistake of going to a perceived expert, and in reality, the advice was very flawed. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think also we weren't really encouraged to ask questions. Whereas now, I think, this generation now is far more, it's really sort of that word, but why? But why? Always seems to come up, at ages that are sort of a lot older than just the, curious toddler now. It's
Yes.
sort of, people aren't afraid to ask questions. It's like, well, how do you verify that? What do you mean? Why, how do you, how, what information do you have to give me that advice? I think maybe people are less accepting, but then there's a lot more information. We're
Yeah.
not just beholden to our
Yeah.
teachers,
No.
you
You're
know.
right. You're right. And, I look back on that and say, that was an area that I made a mistake by doing that advice. Likewise, I've also had great advice from lecturers in the past that's helped me to get to where I am. So I
Mhm.
think it's a balance, but I don't look
Yeah,
back on it
yeah,
and complain now, but I look back on it as a life lesson for sure now.
yeah, no, definitely. Stay curious, always ask questions. So,
Yeah.
and I know you do now. Yeah. So if you could have lunch with any historical figure, who would it be?
So I would
And
like to I
not
would have liked to have had lunch with somebody like David Nichols, yeah, who led the private label for Loblaws. So, obviously one of the leading retailers in the world. He's well recognized for driving the brand values behind President's Choice. And, a fantastic book and probably one of the most inspirational books I've read around the sector. And I would love to meet him. But I think if you gave me two people, then I would love to see
go on.
Ron Dennis. Ron Dennis of the founder of McLaren Racing. Because I think, when you watch his videos and you listen to his approach to life, his attention to detail is incredible. And I
Mm.
think he would be fascinating company. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he would. We've just come back from the new F1 movie, and if it's out in the UK, it's actually very good. The one with Brad Pitt.
Yeah,
That
excellent.
was fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what's a guilty pleasure that you refuse to apologize for?
But it'd be at the end of the day, a glass of red wine and some great quality cheese.
I wrote that.
Well, I'm really lucky. We've just picked up a client who is one of the leading specialist cheese companies in the UK. So you've got to do
Awesome.
the research and make sure you understand the products. But yeah, at the end of the day, Fran, a glass of red wine and some great quality cheese, just to relax and focus on what you're going to do the next day.
Exact. So if you go back to your 30-year-old self and you had a theme song, what would it be?
I should ask you what you've written down, shouldn't I?
No, because I'm not going to tell you.
Okay. This is really hard because there's so many great songs out there, and there's so many great songs from that era, but there's also some great songs for today. But I think, Fran, I would go with U2, "Beautiful Day."
Nice. That would be your theme song. You get up in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
morning and you go, "Beautiful day." Awesome. I love
yeah.
that. So what's one thing you absolutely sucked at in your 30s but have mastered now?
Oh, so this was really easy. This was barbecuing. This was barbecuing. So friends used to come. So we like to entertain, and friends used to come to us when we were living in the UK. They'd come through the door. They'd have a glass of wine, and they'd take the tongs off me for the barbecue. I had a reputation for flame grilling before it became a big thing, Fran. To have a barbecue, people will come in and go, "Oh, Mark's at the barbecue. Take the petrol off of him, and we'll do the cooking." It became a laughing joke across our friends. So that was one of my biggest challenges. Having spent nearly 10 years in Australia, now I'm absolutely on it now when it comes to barbecuing. So I've managed to turn that round. But at 30, Fran, barbecuing was a severe weakness. But I'm glad to say today I can barbecue a lot better.
So would it be true to say then you had to come to Australia for 10 years to actually learn how to barbecue properly?
Oh, absolutely, Fran. Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Mark, that's absolutely, thank you so much for joining me today. It was incredible. I know so many listeners are going to resonate with your story and with really looking at just how to succeed when you've been to the top of your game in so many different areas, from a supplier perspective, a technical perspective, to a buying perspective, and now in the consulting role. So before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap. What's the single biggest takeaway you want people to remember from this conversation?
Be yourself, be consistent, and don't change based on your audience. You've still got to be you at the end of the day, Fran. And, don't go into a room thinking, "Oh, I need to act differently because it's here." Be yourself. People will love you for who you are, particularly if you're consistent and you do your best. Be genuine.
I love that, Mark. I love that. And for everyone listening, here's my challenge to you. Take one thing from today's episode and apply it to your life this week. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who can mentor you. Maybe it's finally taking that leap you've been scared of. Whatever it is, take action, be consistent, be genuine. And if this episode inspired you, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs to hear the content. And if you have a question or a topic you want me to cover in a future episode, send me a message. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in today to myself and Mark Field on What I Wish I Knew at 30. And remember, excuse me, I'm going to cough. Oh, we got all the way through that. So remember, we'll be back again and there'll be lots of new guests. But for today, please help me in just thanking Mr. Mark Field for joining me. And from me, it's goodbye and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.